When I was 8, my family moved into a quaint house on the outskirts of our small town. It was an old place with creaking floorboards and a smell of stale wood that never quite went away, no matter how much my mother cleaned. My parents called it charm, but to me it felt like the house was constantly sighing, as if it had stories it was desperate to tell. The first few nights passed uneventfully, but then I started hearing them, soft whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. At first I thought it was my parents talking in the next room, but when I tiptoed to their door, I found them sound asleep. The whispers continued just on the edge of hearing, like a secret I wasn't meant to know. One night I was lying in bed, trying to decipher the murmurs, when I felt a sharp, cold gust of wind. I sat up, shivering, and saw that my bedroom door had opened on its own. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, and I could almost make out words, though they were garbled, overlapping in a frantic rush. Terrified, I pulled my blanket over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, but the voices didn't stop. They grew insistent, pressing against my mind like fingers poking at a bruise. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw the blanket off and bolted out of my room, running down the hall to my parents' bedroom. The door was closed, but I could see a faint bluish light shining from underneath it. I hesitated, a cold fear gripping my heart. I had never seen that light before, and a part of me didn't want to open the door, didn't want to see what was causing it. But the whispers were growing louder behind me, and I knew I couldn't stay in the hallway. With a shaking hand, I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. My parents were sitting up in bed, their eyes wide open but glazed, staring at the ceiling. The bluish light was emanating from the walls themselves, swirling in strange patterns. The whispers were louder than ever, a chaotic symphony of voices that seemed to fill the room. I screamed, and in that instant, the light vanished. My parents blinked, looking around in confusion. My mother asked what was wrong, but when I tried to explain, they just exchanged worried glances, telling me it was a nightmare and to go back to bed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to the whispers that never seemed to stop. The next day, I tried to talk to my parents about what I'd seen, but they brushed it off, insisting that it was just my imagination. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. The whispers followed me everywhere, even during the day. I'd hear them in the bathroom, in the kitchen, even outside in the yard. My grades began to slip because I couldn't concentrate, and my friends started avoiding me, saying I was acting weird. One evening, I decided to confront whatever was haunting our house. I waited until everyone was asleep, then grabbed a flashlight and crept down to the basement, the one place I'd always been too scared to explore. The stairs creaked under my weight, and I could feel the temperature drop with each step I took. The basement was pitch black, the air thick with dust and mildew. I swept the flashlight around, trying to see if there was anything unusual, but everything seemed normal. Old boxes, broken furniture, and a few rusty tools were scattered around. Just as I was about to turn back, I saw something in the corner. A small wooden door, barely big enough for a child to fit through. It wasn't there before. I was sure of it. The whispers were louder now, urgent and pleading, almost as if they were begging me not to open the door. But I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. I reached out, my hand trembling, and pulled the door open. Inside there was nothing but darkness, a void that seemed to stretch on forever. I shined my flashlight into the opening, but the beam was swallowed by the blackness. And then I felt it, a cold, clammy hand wrapping around my ankle. I screamed and tried to pull away, but the grip was too strong. The whispers turned to screams, deafening and desperate. I looked down and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring up at me from the darkness, filled with a hatred that made my blood run cold. I kicked and thrashed, finally breaking free, and stumbled back up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind me. The whispers stopped immediately, replaced by a heavy silence that felt almost worse. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents what had happened, knowing they wouldn't believe me. But I could feel it every time I walked past the basement door. A presence, watching, waiting. We moved out of that house a few months later, after my father got a job offer in another state. I was relieved, thinking I could finally leave the whispers behind. But even now, years later, in a different house, I still hear them sometimes late at night. They call to me, a faint whisper through the walls, reminding me that some doors should never be opened.